All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian with you guys. And we've got a hell of a show for you guys. A tiny bit of good news in today's show. That's a change. And, of course, plenty of bad news. So, without further ado, the lovely and brilliant Anna Kasparian.
Well, I wanted to start off the show today by talking about a pretty jarring poll that came out by Quinnipiac showing that the majority of American voters actually do want Republicans to take control of Congress. So a new poll shows that the majority of Americans actually want the GOP to take control of Congress after the 2022 midterm elections. Now, this is typically what happens. It's usually a response to whatever party wins in the general election. Usually by the time the midterms roll around, the opposite party will take control. But Quinnipiac finds that there's already a majority of voters who want Republicans to take control. 46%, in fact, 46% of registered voters say they would rather see Republicans win the House majority in 2022 compared to 41% who say that Democrats should retain control in the lower chamber. So we're talking about the House of Representatives here, but there are pretty bad numbers for Democrats when you look at the Senate specifically. It's a similar case in the Senate. 46% say that the GOP or they want the GOP to take control of the upper chamber, while 42% are hoping for a Democratic majority. Now, I just want everyone to keep in mind that it isn't going to take much for the GOP to take control of both the House and the Senate. For instance, they need just 5 seats in the House and only 1 seat in the Senate. And considering some of the fumbles we've seen from the Democratic Party, especially in regard to the budget reconciliation bill and passing some of the bread and butter issues that Biden had campaigned on, these results don't really surprise me. But there are some conflicting pieces of data in this Quinnipiac poll, which I'll get to in just a second.
Okay, so there are a number of people at fault here for this outcome. And so I say at fault, one, because the Republican Party is an absolute disaster and will break this country. And so this is a bad outcome for everyone. But second of all, not just because I think so, but because the polling indicates that the American people do not agree with the Republicans at all on almost any issue. Okay, but as usual, the Democratic Party is the most incompetent, buffoonish, ridiculous, inefficient, negligent party we've ever seen. And of course, the corporate media is, as always, horrific. So, Anna, it's actually a little bit worse than the polling indicates because of gerrymandering. So about a third of the states have been gerrymandered already. The Democrats can stop this at the national level, but they won't because they want to protect the filibuster so they can protect their corporate donors on economic issues. And so that has already picked up 5 seats for the Republicans if normal voting holds. And it won't be close elections because the districts are made to be perfectly safe. So they haven't even gone through most of the states. And in the next election, the Republicans will almost definitely pick up 5 seats to win the House. And that's before these terrible polling numbers. And so if the American people actually knew what the Republicans stood for, would they get some percentage of the vote? Yeah, they'd get 30 to 40%. They do. That's the portion of Americans who think, yay, racism and horrific and, oh, take away my health care, lower my wages just as long as you hate brown people. I get it. I think it's about 30% of the country, right? But they wouldn't. But overall, most of the country does not agree to that at all, including some portion of Republican voters and almost no independent voters. And Democrats would win easily, but they suck at messaging. But more importantly, it's because they never do anything they promised. So if they'd done the things they promised, you wouldn't have these poll results.
Yeah, for me, I think that this is really a mix of the lack of substantive economic reform coming from the Democratic Party. Also, lack of any real reform when it comes to some of the social issues that they really lean into while they're campaigning, right? And it just becomes more and more clear to various groups of people, whether we're talking about African Americans, whether we're talking about women, whatever the issue is, there's a lot of messaging in regard to the Democratic Party wanting to pass reforms to better these people's lives. lives. But then once they're in power, all you see is theater, and they drop any effort to actually pass legislation. Police reform is a good example of that. So the ineffectiveness of the Democrats, the weakness of Democrats, I think plays a huge role. But you're also right in the fact that the media really doesn't do them many favors either, especially when it comes to the economic reforms that I think would help the Democrats gain a little bit of popularity. But there's something that really stood out to me in this poll that I wanted to get into, because when I talk about conflicting data, I'm specifically referring to the fact that when you look at how American voters feel about the overall effectiveness of Democrats versus Republicans, they seem to favor Democrats a little more. So 31% of Americans say that they approve of the job Democrats in Congress are doing. Let me just note, 31% of Americans is not a high number. However, only 25% say the same about congressional Republicans. So, lower number for Republican legislators, higher number for Democratic legislators. But for me, the big takeaway is not only the conflict in messaging here from the respondents, but also the fact that whether we're talking about Democrats or Republicans, they can't even crack 50%. Right? Like their numbers are so low. And it's because I think at this point, voters understand, they know, they've been through enough election cycles to understand that neither party is really working for their best interests.
Yeah. So look, I'll give you two examples of Democratic ineffectiveness that affects this number and will affect the 2022 elections. Number one, the gerrymandering I just told you about. They could end it overnight if they do the For the People Act, if they pass it. That prohibits gerrymandering all across the country. But yes, every Republican is opposed to it because they love gerrymandering. They love rigging elections in their own favor. I'm going to give you an example in a second. But the Democrats are not united. So some Democrats agree with Republicans. We should cheat in favor of Republicans. So they're not going to get rid of the filibuster. So they are not going to pass voting rights that they need for their own survival. You cannot be any more ineffective. You cannot be any more negligent as a party. And you cannot be any more corrupt other than if you're the Republicans. The Republicans tie them on corruption at least. Okay, so then number two, well, theoretically, Biden, Pelosi, Schumer, they all ran on lower drug prices. Now, they're liars. They never meant it. We told you ahead of time they're never going to pass that. That's just for marketing reasons. And then the corporate media will say, Biden is for lower drug prices. Is he? He hasn't passed it all. 88% of Americans want lower drug prices, that provision. So if you wanted to fight for it, you could easily fight for it. And even if you don't win, the Democrats could make a giant issue out of Republicans want higher drug prices, which is true. Every single Republican in Congress wants higher drug prices. They're against that provision because they're all corrupt. That's the one thing that they beat Democrats on. They're slightly more corrupt. So are the Democrats going to do that for messaging purposes and for policy reasons? No, because they also take money from drug companies. And so their corruption completely disables them from being a functioning party in this country.
Exactly.
I could show you a dozen polls that are massively in favor of Democrats. But unfortunately, the Democrats don't do any of those things that they claim they're going to do. So, all right, I'm promising.
Right, real quick. So it's not that they're massively in favor of Democrats. It's that the voters are massively in favor of policies that are proposed by Democrats, but they're also the same policies that Democrats don't really fight for and abandon immediately. And to your point, Cenk, about how they never carry out these policies, that's the reason why we see Democratic lawmakers, whether it be on a federal level or a local level, like with Terry McAuliffe, leaning into whatever culture war is being manufactured by the right wing at any given time. So the right wing gets to frame the culture war, the culture war du jour, and Democrats are like, let's go for it. Like, let's respond. And Democrats are not going to win the culture war because when you're up against fear mongering, when you're up against people who really offer up one thing and one thing only to voters, which is, you're in a bad spot, but at least you're better than the others. Well, then they're going to win. Democrats need to materially benefit people's lives. That's the only winning strategy. And with corporate corruption, they're never going to do it.
Yeah. And so I want to give you the example, one last example of incompetence. But to Anna's point, though, real quick, yeah, later in the show, we're going to talk about Bill Maher. He goes on there and totally supports right-wing framing of racial issues. And Chris Cuomo loves it, and they high five over it. And then Cuomo tells him how brave he is for supporting right-wing ideology. It's absurd. It's absurd. It's absurd. So the media is never like they cheerlead for corporate Democrats or Republicans. They don't really care as long as they're corporate and bipartisan and moderate. And and why did they all switch and are now piling onto the Democrats now? Because this was the point where they were going to try to pass a bill that had higher corporate taxes. Oh, no, that's it. Now, everyone in mainstream media all of a sudden hates the Democrats, hates Biden, hates Kamala Harris, when before they were kissing their ass. So they got rid of the anti-establishment Trump. They bring in establishment Biden, and then they neuter him so he can't do anything. This is such classic American politics. So the example I was going to give about the gerrymandering is in North Carolina, it's a 1.5 point split. So it's nearly tied in North Carolina when you look at the state voting. Because of the gerrymandering, Republicans are going to have 10 districts and the Democrats are going to only have 4. 10-4 when they're nearly tied. And the Democrats go, okay, yeah, sure, do it. We're not going to do anything to stop you, even though it's not just an affront to their party, it's an affront to democracy. But as usual, Democrats are do-nothings. They're losers. And by the way, they force us to come out here and tell you the truth. Like, that's what we do. And they think, oh, God damn it, you're supposed to do marketing. You're not supposed to do the truth. Well, we are. They're losers. You have to get rid of their leadership who are totally and utterly corrupt. Otherwise, they're paid to lose, and they're going to lose to Republicans for the rest of their lives.
One other thing I wanted to mention in this poll, nearly 3/4 of Americans, 74%, say that they're dissatisfied with the direction of the country, including 50% who go a little extra. They say that they're very dissatisfied. So at least half the country is extremely dissatisfied, but the vast majority, 74%, are pretty dissatisfied. And again, that goes back to the point that I was going to make, or I've been making on this show and in the context of this story. When you have both parties beholden to corporate interests, there are too many similarities between them, right? And they're not going to actually better the lives of their own constituents, of their own base. And that's the problem that we're seeing right now. Also, a slight majority of Americans in the poll, 52%, say that the Democratic Party has moved too far left, while just 35% believe that the GOP has moved too far to the right. Look, they didn't get into an explanation as to why the respondents feel that way, but I think that the media messaging here is actually quite powerful because most of the attention in terms of the Democrats going too far left is in regard to like the woke stuff, right? And I actually cringe using the word woke because it's now become like this conservative talking point. But you get what I'm saying. Like there's constant discussion about cancel culture, which we've talked about in the past. The majority of Americans, whether you're talking about Democrats or Republicans, they think that cancel culture has gone too far. Like when they think about Democrats, when they think about the left, that's what they think about. They're not thinking about the economic policies because Democrats haven't delivered on that front.
And it also goes to the propaganda that's blasted out 24/7 by corporate media. The most corporate Democrat in the country, Terry McAuliffe, got his ass handed to him in Virginia, and everyone on cable news, literally, Anderson Cooper led the charge by saying that the Democrats had gone too far left, even though the guy's not left-wing at all, not 1%, okay? And so they repeat it 1,000 times until, hey, and then they ask it in a poll. Now, remember what we told you over and over and over again on CNN, New York Times, and every other piece of trash media that's just marketing for the corporate wing. So too far left, right? Now, is it too far left? They go, oh, yeah, Democrats are too far left. And the Democrats, of course, since they're part of this kabuki theater and their role is to get their ass handed to them by the Globetrotters, they're the Washington Generals. They go out there and go, I guess we're too far left. They send out their own representatives to say they're too far left. And then, of course, since everyone seems to agree, that's what the American people say. It's not based on the issues. I can show you the polling, and we show it to you every day. The country is actually very progressive based on the polling. We want paid family leave. We want higher minimum wage. We want universal health care. But we get tricked by media, Republicans and Democrats into voting against it.
Exactly. All right, let's take a brief break. When we come back, we have more news for you, including a story involving the college Democrats. There's a bunch of scandal, a bunch of controversy, and questions about whether or not bringing up tweets and text messages from when people are adolescents makes much sense in judging who they are today. We've got that story and more when we come back.
Anna with you guys. Let me read a couple of quick comments for you guys. First from our member section, Ian says, if they do, wait for the GOP to, meaning if they win the House back, wait for the GOP to nominate Trump to Speaker. That is, by the way, totally possible. And so that's where we are. Congratulations to America. John Bigino voices a lot of our frustrations. We bust our ass to deliver the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the White House to the Democrats. They're blowing it. That's absolutely right. On Super Chat, James Whiteside says, just my weekly donation. You all donate to keep Common Voice strong and loud. I love TYT. We love you right back. Thank you for the Super Chat. And in the videos, you could do super thanks. And last one here is from Twitch. Moms for Hot Hassan Piker writes in, I love Cenk and the TYT family, but I'm here for Anna. She's the role model I point to my daughters and her friends. Anna's the legit queen, and she looks good doing it. She's my spirit animal.
Well, here's the real question, though. Would I be the top host if Hassan was here? Hassan's not with TYT anymore, but you know, moms for Hassan might be a different equation if he was here. But I do respect that. Thank you. Thank you for the love. I appreciate it. Real quick comment, by the way, on Twitter from Zappafan. He's wondering, you know, did I miss something? What happened to the social breaks? We had some tech issues at work today, guys, in our studio, which is why we're doing the show remotely. And as a result, we're not doing social breaks, and we're reading the comments, of course, after we come back from the breaks. So that's what's going on.
All right, let's do it.
Okay. All right. Well, college Democrats are grappling with accusations of bigotry within its leadership, and they're basing these worries on statements that were made when the alleged offenders were as young as 13 years old. So let me just get this one thing out of the way. I disagree with going back and looking into what adolescents have said and then judging who they are as adults based on that. I think that as adolescents, we're not fully formed yet. Our brains are not fully formed yet. And people say stupid things when they're teenagers, okay? Not all the time, but sometimes they do. I just want to get that out of the way because I think this entire story is pretty absurd. So the controversy actually began in September when Tasneem Ahmad Al-Michael, a Muslim and a former vice president of the College Democrats of America, abruptly ended his presidential campaign after a 2014 tweet in which he used a racial slur resurfaced. Now, I don't know what the racial slur is. Politico didn't get into specifics about that. But Al-Michael says that he has changed since he was a teenager. He said this, what I said as a 15-year-old prior to being in politics was ignorant, inappropriate, and flat out wrong. It doesn't define me, my character, or invalidate the work that I continue to do. And by the way, not only do we not know what the racial slur was, we don't even know the context in which he said it. So we really don't know much about what he said. The only thing we know is that he said something that some people in the college Democrats didn't like, and he said it when he was 15 years old. But by the way, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's more. Cenk, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, look, guys, this story could be considered an example of woke culture, cancel culture, etc. But I actually think this is a little bit of an old school story where if you're a Muslim and if you are in favor of Palestinian rights, they're going to find a way to eliminate you. And that's what college Democrats of America seem to be doing. So let Anna give you more of the details, because your next target, you're going to be shocked to find out, was also Muslim.
So after that controversy, Politico writes that new president and vice presidential candidates subsequently emerged, including Noran Mesbah, who is Muslim and was serving as the CDA's, College Democrats of America's, Director of Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access, short is IDEA. Now, in 2016, apparently, she had tweeted something in regard to the Israeli government. She's also been an activist for Palestinian rights. But this 2016 tweet apparently offended some members of their ranks, right? So a 13-year-old at the time, she wrote, quote, "I blame this debate on the Yahud." And she's speaking about the debate between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. But Yahud is an Arabic word which is sometimes used as a slur against Jewish people. She also tagged another user with a history of anti-Semitic tweets. Again, there are really no specifics. I don't know who she tagged. She was 13 at the time. And apparently, Yahud is sometimes used as a slur against Jewish people. But Mesbah still narrowly won the election to be vice president, okay, of the College Democrats. But she released a statement after that, after she won narrowly, saying, "I apologize for my words in 2016. My comment was in no way rooted in malice or anti-Semitism, especially as a 13-year-old, relatively new immigrant from North Africa with a different regional dialectic linguist comprehension. While I take responsibility for my actions, I am hurt by the Islamophobia and xenophobia that continues to unfold." And by the way, after she released that statement, the College Democrats voted to essentially censure her. The CDA board also passed a resolution, 19-3, so overwhelming majority, censuring her and requiring her to undergo training about anti-Semitism and cultural sensitivity from the Anti-Defamation League, the American Jewish Committee, and the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. But she did not do that. She did not do the sensitivity training. And so turns out that members of the College Democrats decided to pressure her to resign, to step down. Now there's actually impeachment proceedings happening against her. On November 12th, her successor as the IDEA director, Jeremy Ward, released a report calling for her to resign as vice president due to the harm caused to two different communities. Ward had initially announced the independent investigation into her conduct in September. Circulated internally on November 10th, it concluded that Mesbah's past tweet was anti-Semitic and that her claims of Islamophobia were unfounded. It also included a new accusation that she had exhibited, quote, "a pattern of discrimination against members of the Black community, specifically Black women." Yeah. But there were no specifics. Okay, so Ward wrote that the report did not disclose any specific instances of anti-Blackness behavior so as to ensure that those who had complained would not face retribution or harassment.
Absurd.
I think this is insane. Like, you can't accuse someone of being racist and be like, no, people told me that you're racist, but I'm not going to get into specifics. No, that's a serious accusation.
Now, look, this is total insanity. They accuse her of being against Black women. She's a woman from North Africa. Now, this is so dumb. It's so dumb. But guys, I'm telling you, I don't know if you disagree, Anna, but this is not about woke culture. This is very classic establishment Democrats using identity politics in a way that is very similar to the right wing. The right wing says, oh, like right now, I'm not joking. The head of the American Conservative Union, that's the biggest conservative conference, is trying to get Sesame Street canceled, have them taken off the air because they now have an Asian Muppet. Like, no holds barred, nothing. Just, we hate these people and we don't want them represented. It's unbelievable. So that's Republican version of identity politics. The Democratic version is, well, we don't like you for a completely different reason. But we'll pretend that you're against Black women, even though you're from Africa and you're a woman, right? So, and it doesn't matter. They've accused me of being anti-Muslim, even though my family's Muslim. They've accused Bernie Sanders of being anti-Semitic, even though he's Jewish. because that's what establishment Democrats do. They weaponize identity politics in a different way than the Republicans do, but they still weaponize it, right? And so into the substance of this, the charges here. Look, if she had said that tweet, I'd hear out the context, et cetera. But just on the tweet alone, if she had said that as a grown-up or she said it last week, I'd say, whoa, 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 whoa. That does sound a little anti-Semitic to me, and I would have some trouble with that, and we would have to talk that through and see if she really means it, and et cetera, right? Because you don't want people that have opinions that are in any way racial, bigoted, et cetera, to be in a position of power, especially if you're on the left, right? But she said it when she was 13. They make the left wing look ridiculous when they try to hold people accountable for what they said when they were 13. It's absurd.
Cenk, I know what you're referring to, right? In regard to old school Democrat strategy involving identity politics or race, they weaponize it, right? Like they love to weaponize it. I mean, it happened to you when you were running for Congress. They love to weaponize identity-based issues against their opponents. And by the way, it's not just Republican opponents. They're very much willing to weaponize race-related issues or identity-related issues against those who are further on the left. Now, I don't know anything else about this woman. All I know is that she made a comment, a tweet when she was 13 years old. But I just want everyone to take a moment and think about who they were as an adolescent and who you are as an adult. I mean, even from 13 to 21, you change so much. And I think that it's really, really important to create an environment that is accepting of people who are ready and willing to evolve, who have shown that they've evolved. I think that, Democrats do themselves a massive disservice by being the scold party, where you're just constantly like trying to dig up trash on people from when they were teenagers and use that against them, either politically. In this case, it's being used against this woman politically. Like, give people a shot to show whether or not they've changed. You get what I'm saying? Like what we keep seeing over and over again. I mean, we saw it happen with the editor of Teen Vogue, like bringing up her comments from when she was a teenager to then get her fired from her new position. That ain't it. It's not accomplishing anything.
Yeah. And look, keep it real as to why they are actually objecting to her. Because of what she said it when she was 13. No way. Have you ever met a 13-year-old? They have no ability to control what they're saying. You're crazy. Nobody thinks a 13-year-old version of that person is the real version as an adult. That many years like that. No one believes that. It's a total lie by these guys. And why are they targeting her? Because she's for Palestinian rights. It's super obvious.
Yeah, let me get to that.
For Palestinian rights, that's why they're coming to get you. Everybody knows that.
So let's get into that. I wanted to give the specifics on that. Yeah, because I'm sure the audience is wondering, why does Cenk think that? And it's because she does have a history of activism for Palestinian rights. And by the way, college Democrats are split over this. In fact, Justin Hartley, who is the president of the Tulane College Democrats, says elements within our organization are bitter about an election they lost. Elements within our organization do not want to see a young Muslim woman represent Democrats nationally. Mesbah, by the way, said that she had been held to a double standard solely because of the way I look, the faith that I practice. As evidence of that, she also said a member of the College Democrats called her a terrorist supporter last spring because of her strong pro-Palestinian views. She also says, quote, everything I say is torn to shreds. I can't just make a tweet about pop culture without it being ripped apart for underlying messages and hidden meanings. And I mean, we see that on social media all day, every day. It's just that usually it's in regard to adults who make statements while they're adults.
So, guys, the Democratic Party has a history of doing this. I would be really surprised if it was the college students themselves that are engaging in this sort of insane smear tactics. I'd bet any amount of money that it's some grown-up Democratic consultant that's trying to bury Mesbah. Okay, and so in 2016, there was a fight over the Democratic Party platform. All that Bernie Sanders wanted to do, remember, the most successful Jewish candidate in American history, was to help with Palestinian rights. And he was arguing for a two-state solution, nothing radical at all, right? And they came in and accused him and everyone else involved of being anti-Semitic. They brought in African-American surrogates to claim that they were offended on behalf of Israel. It's just all this garbage by the Democrats. They've done it 1,000 times over. They're now doing it to kids. That's the establishment Democratic class. And look, guys, are we biased? Like, for example, I'm from a Muslim background, so does that mean I'm biased in favor of Mesbah? No, I think that her tweet back when she was an infant was not what I would support, right? I think that tweet is wrong. Alexi McCann, the Teen Vogue editor that Anna referred to, she had a tweet that was clearly against Asians, that if she was a grown-up, I would hate my wife and my kids are Asian, right? But she did it when she was 17. Now, the progressive position is supposed to be that people under 18 shouldn't even be tried as adults for actual crimes where people are hurt, right? Now they're saying, nope, we're going to try you and end your career, however, 10 years, 20, 30, 40 years later, for something you said when you were a zygote. Get out of here. It's all lies. It's for their own agenda.
Well, let's move on to Bill Maher, because he had a conversation with Chris Cuomo that I think is worth having a discussion about. So Bill Maher decided to weigh in on the issue of critical race theory. And unfortunately, I don't know if this is a rightward shift for him, but he decided to add some legitimacy to this ridiculous argument that school-age children are learning a graduate level curriculum on systemic racism. Now, pay close attention to how he frames this, but it starts off with Chris Cuomo and one of his statements that also caught my attention. So let's watch.
Critical race theory.
Yeah.
And the people on the left will mock the ignorance. They're too stupid to know.
Yes.
Here's the problem. They still get to vote for you. And feel overwhelms facts all the time in elections. That's nothing new. People vote on feel.
And it's not a phantom either.
That's
that
right.
There's something going on in the schools that never went on before. Now, I'm not in schools. I have no interaction with children whatsoever. But I do understand this issue because I read accounts from parents, from educators, from people, and this is all over the country. When you say critical race theory, again, this is the binary situation we always find ourselves in this country. If you say that on MSNBC, people think that's a great thing because they're finally teaching an honest history of racism in this country, which I know no one who is against that. I'm certainly not against that. I think, I remember what my education was with American history. We learned about the Civil War. I mean, they mentioned racism. We understood slavery and Lincoln and blah, blah, blah. But they didn't really go into it any more than Gone with the Wind goes into it. It was there, but you didn't feel it viscerally. Now we're doing that, and I think that's a good thing. People should understand that. That's different than teaching that racism is the essence of America.
In the classroom. And then, Cenk, he mentions that like his history education growing up. And he's like, we learned about the Civil War and racism was mentioned. And I was like, did he think that was good education? To just mention racism in the context of the Civil War, I think is kind of crazy. But nonetheless, later he said that he's in favor of, maybe teaching a little bit more, like maybe emphasizing the issue of race in the context of the Civil War a little more. He seems to be in favor of that. But I don't know. I haven't seen evidence. Maybe I'm just completely out of the loop, and I'm ready and willing to learn if someone can just show me evidence that public schools are teaching children that this country was founded, like the foundation of this country is racism, and that we're all racist, we're all either oppressed or oppressors. Like, I want to see it. And don't say like, oh, I heard that this school is doing this or that. Don't send me a Daily Caller article on it. I want to see the actual curriculum that's being taught in a public school, in grade school. No one's shown me that. I haven't been able to find it.
No, it's no. Almost everything Bill Maher said there was a lie. And it was right-wing talking points and probably fed to him by his new friends like Ben Shapiro. He's like, I'm seeing it everywhere. Yeah, because you're probably reading right-wing blogs because you've become a right-winger in your old age. So he's like, oh, it's being taught all over the country. Really, Bill? Where? I am seeing it from the parents. Really? Which parents, Bill? You're making it up. And every once in a while when they're challenged on that, they're like, I think there's one example in like Fairbanks, Alaska or something. Oh, really? You found one example out of the entire country? No, I think there might be two out of the entire country. So is that a giant issue? It's not a giant issue. That's a phantom menace. But here is Bill Maher to do a classic, it's actually a Fox News trick. We brought on progressive Bill Maher. No one's more liberal than Bill Maher. And he now says the right wing is right, that everybody should stop talking about racism. It's the Democrats' fault. It's the Democrats' fault for the Republicans being racist. Okay, so look, if we were having a sane conversation and the schools are actually teaching that America's foundation its essence is about racism. Like if you go to Project 1619 and you bring in that conversation, that debate, et cetera, but you're not debating it, you're teaching it as ideology, then we would say, hey, that's an interesting point. And let's talk that through and let's see where the boundaries are, right?
Right.
But that's not what's happening at all. And then, and I got to say at least one more thing about the preposterous things that Maher just said there. He said, I don't know anyone who doesn't want to teach the history of racism. Well, that's because you're incredibly ignorant. All you would have to do is track the news. You're supposed to be in news. I know it's a joke to you, but there was a poll out that came out a couple of weeks ago that very clearly said 4 out of 10 Republicans don't think we should teach the history of racism at all in this country.
Right. Let me go to that
40% of Republicans.
Yeah, it's a little bit higher than that. So it's a Monmouth University poll. We want to make sure we bring you the receipts. They found that 43% of survey takers that identified as Republicans said that they are against the teaching of historical racism in public schools, as opposed to only 5% of Democrats who said the same thing. So 43%. And by the way, they differentiated teaching about historical racism with critical race theory. When they asked specifically about critical race theory, the number among Republicans and Democrats was actually much higher. So when it comes to just simple, hey, we're teaching you history and there's racism in the country's history, obviously, are you cool with your kids learning about that in school? 43% of Republicans said no. So you're right, Cenk. I mean, the expert here who looks at a bunch of anecdotal evidence and then comes up with definitive statements and all sorts of assumptions, apparently is completely unaware of a recent poll by Monmouth University.
And the way, so when he frames it that way, here is a theoretical left-winger. That's what everybody in the media says, Bill Maher's left-wing. And he comes out and says, there are no Republicans who don't want to teach the history of racism. When in fact, there's 43% of Republicans say, no, we don't want to teach it at all. And by the way, why are you touchy about teaching racism? I'm not touchy about it because I didn't do it. And by the way, my ancestors did terrible things, but I didn't do it. And I don't mind you teaching the things that they did. Why? Because it's history. It's history. But Republicans do mind. They do take it personally because they are racist. But Bill Maher comes out and whitewashes it. No, it's the Democrats' fault. And I don't know any Republican. They're all angels. Every Republican Bill Maher knows. I mean, they have dinners together. They're on his panel 24/7. He agrees with them 24/7. And he's here to tell you, as a liberal, the right wing is right about everything.
Let's move on to the next clip.
The kids are taught and sometimes separated into groups, oppressor and oppressed. Again, does a kid even know what those words mean? Would they gravitate toward that if you hadn't told them? I mean, you're taking something that was getting better, race relations in America, and I think everyone recognizes, everyone right-thinking in my view, that still a lot of work needs to be done. remedial efforts need to be taken still. Racism is part of America. But I did a thing one night about progressivophobia, which is a term Steven Pinker coined, which means somehow liberals got afraid to acknowledge progress. You know, it's two thoughts in your head at the same time. You can acknowledge that we have made great progress on all the social issues. And yet there is still more work to be done. We're not saying mission accomplished. It's just saying, let's live in the year we're living in.
There has been progress in some areas, right? Gay couples can get married. Like, you don't want to minimize that. But the reason why race has become such a big topic, it's like at the, it's front and center in a lot of these discussions, is because of police shootings of unarmed Black people. It's because of Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old who gets shot and killed by a cop who shows up and shoots and kills him within 2 seconds. He's playing with a toy gun and the cop shoots and kills him in 2 seconds. Philando Castile, who had a legal gun and let the cop know during a routine traffic stop, hey, I have a licensed gun in my glove compartment. Shot and killed in front of his girlfriend and her daughter. I mean, it's those types of cases where people are like, hey, can we maybe look at this and work toward progress in this area? But the dominant discussion among right-wingers in this country has been to minimize that, to pretend like it doesn't exist. They're far more organized. They've got money behind them. They unify behind the message of, no, police violence against Black people doesn't exist. And they win. They win. They win to the point where all of a sudden you have Bill Maher on CNN just completely forgetting the fact that the whole reason why we're talking about race in this country is because we have Black and brown people who get gunned down while they're unarmed. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think Bill Maher is worse than a right-winger, because you expect these talking points from a right-winger, but here comes Bill Maher to validate it and pretend, oh, my side is totally wrong. My beloved buddy Ben Shapiro and every friend I have in the right wing and Ann Coulter, they're all right. So everybody remember, we all agree the left is wrong and the right wing is right. So he says absurd lies like they're teaching all across the country that that the kids should be lined up as the oppressed and the oppressor. Show me one example, Bill. Show me all across the country. That's not a thing. You just made it up. You just made it up because you probably read right-wing trash and think it's real. Because all my friends are right-wing, right? There is no such thing. They don't line up kids. If they lined up kids and said, you are the oppressor, I would hate that. I would be 100% opposed to that. That's not what they do. You liar. You liar. Okay? And so, and don't come at me with, well, kind of maybe a little bit when we teach racism, doesn't that say something? And then it's in Fairbanks, Alaska. All over the country, oppressor, and they make the kids separate out in the classroom. That is a bald-faced lie. He's a terrible guy. All right, but it's much worse than that. So he says then, well, it was getting better. It was getting better. And presumably the left wing screwed it up. I mean, these Black people complaining about getting killed and murdered and shot by the cops all the time. It was getting better until you started complaining again. Okay, it was getting better. And the Democrats ruined it. The left wing ruined it. You miss Trump coming in and calling every Latino immigrant rapists and criminals? What, did the Democrats do that? No, Trump did that. When he said there was good people on the Nazi side, Bill, on the Nazi side. And then you're saying, oh, it was getting better until what? Oh, until the left wing did something wrong. Not Trump. I know he's against Trump, but in the context of this conversation, he's not talking about the right wing going massively and brazenly racist. He's making it seem as if the left wing made it racial. That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, look, when the Trump supporters marched in Charlottesville and chanted, "The Jews will not replace us," that's what progress in America looked like. And so I guess Bill Maher thought that wasn't that big of a deal when he, cites the incredible progress we've made. Look, this country has always had racial tension. There's no question about it. There was a point where people were not as overt. They didn't feel as emboldened as they are today. And I guess that's what he's referring to when there were, people thinking terrible things and wanting to do terrible things in the shadows. But to talk about the issue of discrimination, of racism in this country as if like it's this made up problem that progressives are whining about, I think you're right. I mean, it's just awful. He's not citing any real concrete evidence, and he's furthering the nonsense talking points and manufactured garbage coming from the right wing. And everyone gets to point at him and say, look at him, he's a lefty, he's a liberal, and this is what he says, so it must be true.
Yeah, and he said, no one's saying mission accomplished. Again, you made that up. Almost the entire Republican Party is saying mission accomplished. We shouldn't do anything about police reform. They just voted that way. They didn't get a chance to vote because the Republicans killed the bill. I should be more accurate. But every Republican is against police reform when unarmed black men are being shot all across the country. And so, oh, no, nobody's saying mission accomplished. You're absolutely wrong. And a huge percentage of Republicans say don't ever teach racism. No one's saying it's mission accomplished. No, you're projecting. I believe that Bill Maher thinks that the mission is not accomplished, although barely around the edges. But he's speaking as if the Republicans are pure as the driven snow. I'm on here at CNN to tell you, my God, the poor Republicans, the poor right wing, the Democrats made it racial, and we had it figured out. It was mission accomplished. In another part of the interview, he said, everybody wants to live in diverse neighborhoods now. Where the hell do you get that from? He's just picking one thing after another out of his ass and going, here's a right-wing talking point for no reason. Here, I'll lie about this too. Now, do I believe that Bill Maher wouldn't mind living in a diverse neighborhood? I believe that. I don't think he's a monster. I think he still has some left-wing positions, etc. I'd be surprised if he was racist against anyone but Muslims. I wouldn't want to live next to Muslims. They're violent savages. He's talked about that many times. But okay, I'll grant him that he wants to live in a diverse neighborhood. You think Tucker Carlson wants to live in a diverse neighborhood? You think his audience wants to live in a diverse neighborhood? Tucker Carlson does stories about, well, this town in Pennsylvania used to be all white. Now it's like 40% Latino. Well, you can't blame people for being opposed to that change. And then Bill Maher's like, I don't see it. Mission accomplished. It's not Tucker's fault. It's your fault for criticizing Tucker. Absurd. And this is what the crap. And then Chris Cuomo afterwards goes, oh my God, are you worried about being canceled? You're so brave. Please. I'm not saying Bill Maher should be fired. I'm saying he should read a book. He should read an article. He should know anything, and he should stop lying on national television.
All right, we got to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, and all of you as well. I'll try to get to as many comments as I can. On Twitch, RC Tycoon wrote, love being part of the family. Hello, Anna and Cenk, and take the hashtag Bezos bucks and spread the message of truth for change. Hashtag Engineer Dragon. He's right. You can actually redistribute Jeff Bezos' money to us. If you have Amazon Prime already, it takes about 30 seconds. TYT.com/Prime, and it shows you, without it costing you a single penny, how you could take money and from Bezos, who owns Twitch, and give it to us. Okay, so that's awesome, and thank you for doing that. Cyclopean Cyborg wrote in, I now can't imagine how I would consume the news without TYT. Thanks. Thank you guys. You make the show possible. And Jessica on Super Chat wrote in, these far-right DNC operatives attacking these Democrat Muslims have the same level of xenophobia and racism as the Republicans who attack Ilhan. It's exactly the same thing. And by the way, the corporate Democrats love attacking Ilhan Omar just as much as the Republicans do. So they're not for us at all. I wish I had time for these. I don't, but I do want to thank all these folks who use YouTube Super Chat when we're live. That's so important on the videos. Please use Super Thanks. Jason Ray, Peter Hamby, Hard Truth, Luis, and Maple Strip Dragon. Thank you guys. All right, Anna.
Well, we do have a little bit of good news, and I wanted to share that with you. So the family of Elijah Mcclain will receive a record $15 million settlement after filing a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city of Aurora, Colorado. Now, of course, this is over the death of Mcclain, their son. Mcclain died on August 30th of 2019 at the age of 23, and this was following a confrontation with Aurora police on August August 24th. Okay, so what they had done was respond to someone who had called the police saying that Mcclain looked sketchy. And the reason why he allegedly looked sketchy was because he was wearing a ski mask, but he's an introvert. So he was at a convenience store. There's actually footage of him at the convenience store paying for items he was buying. And then as he was walking home from the convenience store, he was confronted by the cops, and they put him in a position like a chokehold, essentially, which cut off circulation to his brain. And then when paramedics showed up, they injected him with ketamine. And the dosage of the ketamine was so incredibly high considering his relatively small frame. So just to give you more details, because I think it's important to know what happened, and we'll show you some pretty horrific video of the incident. Aurora police approached Mcclain on August 24th of 2019 as he was walking home from a trip to the convenience store. So a citizen had called saying that Mcclain looked sketchy. When Aurora officers approached him, the verbal confrontation turned physical and a chokehold was applied. Paramedics then injected him with ketamine, a powerful sedative, and he went into cardiac arrest. I should also note that he was never armed. Okay. And he kept begging the police to just let him go, and that he wasn't trying to cause problems, that he's an introvert. Now, the city council in Aurora called for an independent investigation. And here's what the investigation found. So the report, which was released not on Monday. This is an older article. I'm going back and finding some data on what happened. Noted that an officer must have a reasonable suspicion of criminal activity to conduct a stop. The decision to stop Mcclain, however, did not appear to be supported by any officer's reasonable suspicion that Mcclain was engaged in criminal activity. And that's because he had not engaged in criminal activity. Next, the three officers decided to frisk Mcclain for weapons, which is legally allowed only when there is a belief that safety is in danger, the report states. The panel was not able to identify sufficient evidence that he was armed and dangerous to justify a frisk. And by the way, the report also found at the time of the ketamine injection, Mr. Mcclain had not moved or made any sounds for about 1 minute. In addition, EMS administered a ketamine dosage based on a grossly inaccurate and inflated estimate of Mcclain's size. They estimated that he was 190 pounds. He was really 140 pounds. And again, he wasn't doing anything wrong. It was just someone who called the police, said that he looked sketchy, and this is how the police responded. He was hospitalized after the ketamine injection and after he suffered from cardiac arrest, and he died a few days later. They ended up taking him off of life support. Just an incredibly tragic story, but I'm glad that the family decided to file a federal civil rights suit, and now they have won a settlement that is a record in Aurora, Colorado, $15 million.
Okay, so first of all, as unfortunately we've told you many times now, all across the country, police are taught to brutalize the citizens. And so in this case, we showed you the video before. The kid obviously has an issue. It's super obvious. And he's a frail little kid. And cops are taught, though, he's not listening to direction. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what his issues are. Kick the crap out of him. And then inject him with horse tranquilizer. Don't tell Joe Rogan. He might get into it. Okay. Oh, no, it's not used for horses. Okay, just for horses. All right, anyways. So that's a brutal thing to do to a kid. Or, hey, he got called in. He was wearing a ski mask. He seems harmless, and he clearly isn't understanding what we're saying. Maybe we ask him where his home is, and we walk him home. And then we ask his parents. No, break him. No, we teach the cops to be savage to us. It's insane. We have to change the culture, but we're not going to because Democrats are the feckless. The Republicans love this kind of culture against black kids and really against anyone that isn't them. And then the problem here is it's a great result, $15 million for the family. At least there's some degree of justice, so it's good news. But they have $10 million in insurance. The $5 million has to get picked up by the city. My proposal, and one day we'll have a petition about it, but we want to check with activists and make sure everybody agrees. But why doesn't it come out of the police union money? Why does the whole town have to pay for it? Why doesn't the people who did it, they should pay for it? Why are we paying for it? They're the ones who brutalized them, right? But of course, if you do that, the Republicans squeal. No, you cannot punish cops for doing terrible things to innocent people. No, you have to punish the taxpayers instead. No, make the cops pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. I also want to note that there might also be justice in another form because this is a civil suit, but the family has also is also working in a criminal suit as well, because the officers who were involved were found through that investigation to have lied as well. So I wanted to give you a few of those details because, again, according to that report, the officers' statements on the scene and in subsequent recorded interviews suggest a violent and relentless struggle. The limited video and the audio from the body cameras or body-worn cameras reveal Mr. Mcclain surrounded by officers, all larger than he, crying out in pain, apologizing, explaining himself, and pleading with the officers. And as I mentioned earlier, the Aurora fire lieutenant advised the paramedics to draw a dose of ketamine based on an estimate that Mcclain weighed 190 pounds, the report states. He, in fact, weighed 140 pounds. And by the way, look, it's easy to make this mistake because you look at his picture and he looks so young and he's 140 pounds. But, you know, he was 23 at the time, but he was also he was an introvert. And you watch the video and he's just begging the cops to stop restraining him because he can't breathe. And he's just saying, I'm not trying to cause problems. I'm an introvert. Please, I'm an introvert. That's why he was wearing the mask. It's just a really heartbreaking story. You know, even though there's a little bit of justice, you can't help but feel absolutely awful for the family. And the cops who were involved and the paramedics involved are facing charges for their involvement. So there is also a criminal trial taking place.
Yeah, and the family is happy to hear that. Obviously, it's the state that's pursuing the charges against the cops and the other guys in this case. But guys, look, their defense, and it's going to be an interesting one, and I would hear it out if I was a member of the jury, is they're going to tell them we got trained to be brutal, and this is in our training. If someone doesn't listen to us, we're supposed to physically assault them, and pretty severely, because not listening to a police officer is considered the worst form of disrespect, and you have to make sure that you crush it before you do anything else. All they got to do is show their training, and so we constantly blame the guys who did it because they did do it, and it is their fault. But we should also blame the people who trained them to do it, and that part we never get to. And I guarantee you that if the money came out of the police union in that town, it wouldn't have happened because the guys doing it would be like, whoa. I mean, it was fun beating up innocent people, but if it's going to cost me money, then I don't know that I'm in favor of it. And the other cops probably would have tackled them. I don't want to lose my pay. I don't want to lose some of my salary just so you can have fun beating up this poor kid. And I say kid because you watch the video, man. He sounds like he's a kid. I don't know how emotionally developed he was given the video. And they just crush him. And he's dead. He's dead.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back for the second hour, we've got more news for you, including, honestly, a statement from one of the lawyers representing the Capitol rioters that I very much appreciated. I enjoyed. And I want you guys to watch that video when we come back. We'll see you then.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.